We are delighted that Higginbotham's has thoughtfully made a selection of Dr. Pradeep's books available for us this evening. I encourage you to take a moment to browse through them, and I'm certain you will find them as engaging and insightful as the talk you're about to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, conversations like these remind us that culture is not something we inherit passively, it is something we continue to discover, question, and celebrate together. Please join me in extending a warm, thoughtful welcome to Dr. Pradeep Chakravarthy. We look forward to an evening of learning, reflection, and inspiration. Over to you, Pradeep.
Thank you, Jayashree. Super. Thank you very much, Jayashree, for doing that. And thank you, Indra, for getting all the logistics together. When I found out that this whole event is called Thought Loom, I said I have to put a little bit of thought into how I dress, because generally I'm a sloppy dresser. I mean, of course, McKinsey, Infosys and all, I dress properly, jackets and all that stuff. But generally I'm a sloppy dresser. So today I said I have to take a little bit of extra effort. The shirt is from my mom's sari, which is called Paimadi, which was bought many years ago in Nalli. And the Angavastram is from Chettinad. It should be at least from the 1920s, if not earlier than that. Yeah. So I put some thought. So even men can dress well sometimes. Before we get into the Arthashastra and what it talks about textiles, we need to understand this word Artha very carefully. And you may be wondering why. I mean, generally what we know the Arthashastra, it's about governance and how a king should rule and all that. But Chanakya was also a very good philosopher. And generally when you read texts like this, they were never meant for people to give lectures like this. It was actually like a thoughtful conversation and a dialogue where people ask questions. So indulge me a little bit. I'm going to ask a few questions, not to put anybody in the spot, because at the end of the day, all of you collectively will know much more than me. It just happens that I read the Arthashastra a couple of times. Yeah. So when we talk, before we understand Artha, there's another word that we need to understand, and Kautilya, who writes the Arthashastra, is very conscious about it all the time, which is the word kama, right? So what is one difference between all living beings and non-living beings? What's one big difference? Desire, right? Needs. All of us have needs. And let's understand these needs a little bit more, because Kautilya has really understood them very well. Now I'm sitting here and I have your attention for next about 40 minutes, yeah? What do you think will be the needs going on in my mind? And be candid, no? Be very blunt. What will be some of the needs that are going on in my mind? Attention. My need for attention, my need for appreciation. What else? That I want a response. Yes. What else? Make you feel that you've learned something. So successful lecture. No, get a little bit more candid. I hope some of you will buy my books. Yeah. I hope. No, very practical, right? I hope Jayashree will call me back again. I hope some of you will come for my events again. All of these are needs in my mind, yeah, and we have to accept these needs are there. Now, if one of these needs is met, right, will it solve the equation? No, it won't. More needs will come up, yeah. So, Arthashastra, Kautilya has understood so well. So, even if you don't remember any of these textile references, right, you'll have to remember this one, because it's one of the most famous quotations in the Arthashastra, which is a public servant who is constantly handling money is like a bee which is sipping the nectar of many flowers. It is inconceivable that the bee will keep sipping nectar without tasting a little bit by itself. So by the very design, people who handle public money are corrupt. Yeah, this is what he said at that time. So he was this is one of the famous quotations. So there are so many needs in all of us. And even if one needs get sorted out, 100 new needs come up. It's like the Greek mythology Hydra monster, yeah? It's like that. Now, money, right? We all want money. Money, is it a need or something that fulfills a need? No, it's not. So we can get into a lot of sadness in life if we think money is a need. Money is actually something that only fulfills a need. So when needs are always unlimited, what could be some of the things that fulfill needs? Take some guesses. What are things that fulfill our needs? Money is one. Some material objects, yeah. Good health, food, yeah. appreciation, respect, all of these, right? Now, if we say needs are always unlimited, how can we generalize all these things that fulfill needs? Are they unlimited or limited? They're always limited. Yeah. Money also, you have a limit. Yeah. Today, in your attention span, also, there is a limit to how much of attention you're going to give to me. Yeah. Even in terms of appreciation, there's only this much of appreciation that you can show. So, generally, karma or needs are unlimited. Yeah. We can never fulfill all our desires. Artha, which fulfills desires, is always limited. Even your attention span today with me is only limited to that for half an hour, 45 minutes. If I start getting boring and all of you pick your phones out, immediately I know that the artha is gone. Yeah? So always needs are unlimited. So in the conflict, there are two choices. The law of the forest is that the bigger fish eats the smaller fish, which eats the smaller fish, which is chaos for us. Yeah. Dharma, which is what we want in our lives, is where your need is achieved, my need is achieved, all the other people's needs are also achieved, and only the king can do this. So, Kautilya's Arthashastra is basically a Shastra means a textbook. It's a textbook on how to earn money and how to keep that money, and most important, how to distribute the money back so that you control your kingdom and your kingdom doesn't become anarchy. This is basically what Kautilya's Arthashastra is about. For a long time, from Rig Veda is one of our oldest texts, 4,000, 5,000 years, whatever, there's been this long tradition of saying we must pay our allegiance to the clan chief, that we must obey the ruler. And then there are lots of stories built up about how the ruler is actually God and all that stuff. But basically, ruler is the boss. This is on one side. But you also want a good ruler. You don't want a tyrant to rule. So as many texts that we have which talk about how we should obey the ruler, there are that many texts that talk about how a ruler should behave. Yeah. And it's in the oddest of places. Mahabharata, for example. There's a huge chapter called Vidura Niti, where Vidura and Dhritarashtra, I think they have a conversation on what is a good ruler. Kaschit Sargam, which is sadly nobody talks about it today, but I've heard old recordings of Katha Kalashepam people and all talking about how in the 1910s, 1900s, there'd be 3-hour lectures on the Kaschit Sargam, which is the 100th Sarga of the Ramayana, where Rama asks Bharata a series of about 30 to 40 questions. And if you list those questions out, they become a template for what a king should do. And in fact, many of them will be very relevant for Jayashree to run the shop and any of you to run your homes, your offices, your NGOs or whatever organizations you're part. Very, very relevant. I'll give you one example where Rama says, are you ensuring that every week there is a Sunday or a market that happens in different parts of the villages? Are you ensuring that in those villages the weights and measures that they use are standardized? Are you ensuring that prices are fairly fixed? Are you ensuring that on the same day, 2 Sundays that are happening shouldn't be selling the same products? Then people will be confused of where to go. Are you ensuring that you have many trees that are planted on the walkways or on the roadside? These are all the questions that he asks. And this trees thing is important because, I was wondering maybe it's only for travelers and stuff like that. But when I looked at the deed for the creation of Chintadripet, our own Chintadripet in Chennai, one of the conditions was there had to be trees on the sides. And those of you who like fabric and sarees, can you guess why? Because the dyes, you need trees on the side of the roads to let the dye, let the sun hit the dye so that the moisture evaporates. So trees had a very practical purposes for weavers as well. So this is the kind of information that you get. In many of the early texts, we hear of this word Arthashastra, that we heard that it is like one of the best texts on this, but we never had a copy of it. And strangely enough, by about the 11th, 12th centuries, references to the Arthashastra disappear. So generally, scholars have assumed that the Arthashastra was a lost text. We know it was composed by somebody called Kautilya or Chanakya or Vishnugupta. We know it was like the last word in those days on how to run a country, but we didn't have the text. In 1905, we have to go to Mysore now. In 1905, Shama Shastri was a scholar in the Research Institute, Oriental Research Institute in Mysore. And he was opening this bundle of palm leaf manuscripts, which had been donated to Mysore by some Brahmin in Tanjavur. And he was absolutely flabbergasted to see one palm leaf manuscript which said Arthashastra. And he was very, very excited about it. They were the pages, the palm leaves were misarranged. There were some errors in that. There were some pages missing. All of this happened. So anyway, he worked really, really hard. And he started publishing parts of the text in 1909 and finally a full English translation in 1915. This was a big moment for us in India because finally we found the Arthashastra, or at least Shama Shastri refound it. Otherwise, it was considered a lost text. So from 1915, many people have written the Arthashastra. In fact, there's even a version for children. Kangle is supposed to be one of the best versions. I generally use Shama Shastri and Kangle's version, and it's not a very big book. It's about that thick. Easily in about 10 hours, you should be able to skim through it. It's not like a bedside reading book because basically it's not meant for light reading. It's a textbook manual for a king on how to administer, how to get money, how to keep his kingdom, and how to spend his money. So this is what the Arthashastra is all about. So today we're going to look at a little bit of the other things that Arthashastra looks at, and largely focus on the textiles. But because Chanakya wrote this for the king to look at how money is involved in textiles, it's basically a long laundry list of how you should earn money through textiles. How do you ensure that the quality is maintained? How do you ensure that disputes don't happen? So it's a very accountant's income tax view of the textiles. That's what we're going to look at basically today. But before that, there are a lot of mysteries about this place. Can I get a bottle of water? There are a lot of mysteries about this text. Now, we don't even know who this Kautilya was, who this Chandragupta, who this Vishnu Gupta was. Throughout the text, there is no biographical reference. I'm married, I have kids, I'm Samudragupta's chief advisor. Nothing. Author is very, very focused. This is not a book for me to sing my praises, for me to give you my achievements. My focus is on writing this. That's all he's very clear about. Yeah. So throughout we have no biographical references at all. In one place it says Kautilya and Chanakya. Actually, those words don't appear much in the Arthashastra. Right at the end, he says, "I am Vishnu Gupta. I did this." This is all we know. General tradition is that Chandragupta Maurya of the Maurya dynasty, who ruled in the 4th century, Kautilya was Chandragupta's Rajaguru, and he wrote this. This is general tradition. The text doesn't mention any of this. This is just a story that's grown up. And I think this is something that you will find in all our ancient texts, and it may be a bit of a lesson for all of us today, that all our ancient authors, they were not obsessed with blowing their own trumpets. When they wrote all these books, they said the focus should be on the book, not on who I am. So you find no biographical details. In fact, even this Kautilya and all that, it's actually a Gotra name. It's not even his name. We don't know anything. There's another tradition that that Vishnu Gupta said, "I've done this Arthashastra for kings. Now I need to do a children's version." And some of you would have heard Panchatantra, right? Which is the book on how princes should be great kings. There's a legend that he wrote it. We don't know. Yeah. So Arthashastra, basically they say, is somewhere around 4th century BC, written around that time. Because of a couple of things. One is he talks about corals that were being traded from Alexandria, and that trade stopped after that. He also talks about China for silk. He talks about silk from China coming in, which is the Qin dynasty, which was in the 2nd or the 3rd century. So by the 4th century, they've become so famous that it's called China itself. So these are some conjectures, but the truth is we don't know. Now, scholars being scholars, to complicate this further, they said, it's actually not one person who's written it. Multiple people came together and wrote it. And he himself in some places says, "I am writing this because I disagree with a lot of people who've written before me. So I'm trying to kind of, give the right version," as he says. And there is even some stories that some parts of it is what he wrote, some parts of it what he wrote before all. So there's a lot of confusion in all of this. And this confusion will happen even more if you look at texts like this from a very Western point of view, which is that one person, one date, they're very obsessed with this. In India, we're not so obsessed with it. We say the text is important. And it's perfectly okay for the Arthashastra to come to Kerala, because this is like mostly focused on Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh of today, perfectly okay for Arthashastra to come down south, and somebody in Tamil Nadu will add a little bit more, somebody from Kerala will add little bit more, and we'll be very okay with it. This is the Indian tradition, is that you get an important text and you fiddle around with a little bit with what makes sense to you. We're very comfortable with that. West is not. So generally, all these people who've debated and dialogued and fought about when he lived and all that, mostly Western scholars only. But we should be very proud that we have a text like this, that it's at least 4th century BC, if not earlier, and the level that he goes into detail is truly remarkable. I mean, I'm going to give you like 1% of what he said today, but it gives you such a vivid imagery of the day-to-day economics of life in that 4th century BC, which very few countries can boast about compared to us. Yeah. So let's look at the structure in brief. The Arthashastra is composed into 15 books. These are called Adhikaranas. 15 chapters. They're not actually very, like I said, they're not very thick. You'll take about half an hour to maximum 40 minutes to read one chapter. And I strongly recommend Kangle or Shama Shastri's work, both of them freely available online. Go and check it. Textiles may not be your thing. Maybe it's food, maybe it's women's rights, education, whatever it is, you will find something in the Arthashastra. Yeah? So we have totally about, and each of these books have multiple chapters, so about 150 chapters in total. The first book is very interesting because it talks about how a king should be trained. Not connected with textiles, but some common information that you might like to hear. He says, okay, let me ask this as a question. Who does he say is the biggest enemy for the king? Think. No, remember, he is also a philosopher. Huh? Yeah. You're close. You go dig a little deeper. Huh?
His conscience?
Go a little deeper. It's the 5 enemies actually. Senses. He says the biggest enemy for the king are the 5 senses. This is what you have to control first. Yeah. And he gives like one timetable of how the king should read his life. He should wake up early. He should do physical exercise. He should listen to his courtiers. Then in the afternoon, he should listen to the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. He should listen to dance, because he says dance, music, and the arts, they all teach all these essences in a very engaging way through stories. So he says all of these things are important. So he actually gives a timetable, and he gives a checklist of what are all the enemies for a king, and most of them are internal enemies. Actually, if you take a printout of that, for being a good leader, for being a good human being, it will match fairly well. So this is the first chapter. He talks about this. Then he also talks about how a king has to be guided by ministers. He says, just like a cart cannot move forward without wheels, the wheels are the ministers of the king. So very, very important. And he then gives a whole bunch of qualifications for how these ministers should be. And then he comes on to saying, what are the main departments from which the king should make his money? And in that, we have agriculture, mining, trade, and fabric, textiles. So these are the 4 that he says main economic activities that the king should monitor through superintendents. Then we have other chapters on law courts, on warfare and diplomacy, and all of this also we have. So each of these, so weaving, commerce, agriculture, liquor, mining, armory, all of these had independent superintendents. So I am going to go to that one couple of paragraphs which detail out what the superintendent of weaving should be looking at. This is the core of what I'm going to talk about. So let's get to that. One second. So basically, in this chapter, because it's going to be like a laundry list of things that I'm going to read, basically what I want you to take back as a broad sense of knowledge is textiles for the Mauryan kings were very, very important economic department. They earned a lot of money. They were also a department where a lot of people used to work in. They had very highly complex rules on the quality of the fabric and the pricing of the fabric and the wages that had to be given to the people. So all of this we know from this text. We also know that the range of textiles included silk, cotton, and wool. And we had a mixture of textiles that we imported from outside, what we imported and then worked on, what we created ourselves, and what we also exported outside. So all of these, whatever we are doing today, We were doing that in that time also. All of this was happening at the same time. So this is the broad idea that you want to get. Let me give you some examples. Yeah. So he says when you're starting, and you can start new workshops for weaving, you can get cloth from Kshauma, Dukkula, silk yarn, hair of the Ranku deer, and cotton yarn. He said these are all the major raw materials for textile. The Kshauma he uses very often, and he never gives an explanation for this. So this scholars believe is the silk yarn that came from Kashi, from Varanasi, because all of this, remember, Maurya kingdom is somewhere in Magadha, UP, that region. So he's very familiar with that part of India. So Kshauma must have been Banarasi silk or Kashi silk, that area. Dukkula, we're not so sure. Silk yarn we have. Silk yarn we had both in India, and we got silk yarn from China as well. And this hair of the Ranku deer, cotton yarn. And he says that the workers who work on these, because these are the main ingredients, the people who employ these workers, they must gift them perfumes and flowers and many other things apart from salary, so that they show that they are grateful to these workers for working on these very rich and important textiles. So basically he's saying, if your labor force is working on very expensive raw material, take good care of them, give them perfumes, make them feel happy. Yeah, very, very practical. Huh? This you'll read throughout the Arthashastra. He's a very practical guy. Then he says, goes on to a little bit more on raw materials. He says the other raw materials that are also used, we have cotton wool, silk, linen, and then other types of animal hair that can also be spun into yarn. And he says when you're using animal fiber, animal yarn, better to use them for rugs and for coverings. So generally, it means richer people would not have used animal yarn on their clothes. It would have been more for rugs and bed sheets and things like that. And so we get a sense of how cloth is not just silk and cotton, but we have a lot of range of cloth. So if you went to the Magadha Empire at that time, or the Maurya Empire, and you went to the shop, you're going to see a whole variety of silks and cottons, but you're also going to see a lot of animal yarn as well. Then he says, where do these fabrics come from? Which regions? So he says, that which is manufactured in the Vanga country is white and soft. Vanga is Bengal. Yeah. Then he also says, along with this Vanga, he also lists Poundra and Suvarna Kudya. Now the Suvarna Kudya, people say, because he's listed these three together, Poundra is probably that region somewhere in Assam. Yeah. Suvarna Kudya, apparently there is a village in Assam even today called Son Kuriha. Okay, and they believe this must have come from there. So Assam, at any rate, seemed to have given us a lot of silk and a lot of cloth at that time, which came eastwards into the Mauryan Empire. And he says this Poundra cloth is very famous for the black cloth that they make, and it's so smooth, it's actually like a gemstone. Yeah, and then he says this Suvarna Kudya cloth is the color of the sun, smooth like a gem, woven while wet, and of very uniform or mixed texture. So from this, what we can get is this Suvarna Kudya must have been some kind of yellow color silk, some raw silk of some sort, which was really smooth, and it was woven when it was wet. I'm not sure. I think Jayashree and you will be able to explain this better. How this fabric would have been woven when it was wet. But anyway, you apparently had two varieties. You had a uniform, very silky kind of variety, and you had one which was a little bit more rougher. Yeah. Then he goes into a lot of details on the yarn count and the weaving techniques. I'll just give you like a broad understanding of this. He says the cloth can be worn with single yarn, with 1, 1.5, 2, 3, or 4 yarns. Yeah, this is the range that he uses. And he says threads may be laden with a needle. It could be before the weaving or after the weaving. It could be joined in pieces or left broken. So I'm guessing what he means is the end of the cloth. Sometimes you could have multiple fabrics woven together, and either the embroidery happens after the joining is done or before the joining is done. This is what he means out of that. So basically there was a lot of variety available in those days. Yeah. So they give you a sense of how our weaving knowledge and the ways we could join woven fabric together was very, very nuanced. We had a lot of varieties in that. And so I have left it at this, but what the implication from this is, each thing will be taxed differently. So if you had one set of cloth where you made two separate pieces of cloth and you embroidered them together or you stitched them together, that will be one tax rate. And if they had embroidery earlier on, that will be one tax rate. After the joining was done and then the embroidery was done, that will be one tax rate. So this is the implication of whatever he is saying. And all of this, the superintendent should be checked. So all of this is a manual for the superintendent of the weaving department of the king. And all of this is about how much of money he is making through taxes for the government because of all these weaving techniques. Yeah. Then he says there's another linen kind of fabric that we had. And this, he just says this linen is either from Kshauma in Kasi or Poundra. So this line alone is very revealing, because this Kshauma from Kasi and this Poundra, wherever that place is, they must have been so famous for their linen and for the silk that he never explains them. In many other places, we have explanations of why. So this must be something that was really popular in that period, where he said that, boss, if you don't know this, you can't be a superintendent with the king. Just junk it. So we don't know much about what these two were. Then he spends a lot of time on silk. Yeah. He says silk receives actually a lot of attention, obviously because silk must be the highest quality fabric. Yeah. So he says Patrona silk come from the Magadha region, which is Bihar. The Poundras and the Suvarna Kudya. So again and again, these three areas come. So Assam must have been some kind of an important place. And he says the silk is classified by what trees, by certain trees. And scholars believe the tree connection is because they must have had their own silk worms. And the classification will be because of what leaves those worms ate. So based on that, there's one tree called the nagar tree. This is not our Nagalingam. Our Nagalingam wasn't in India at that time. It was still sitting in Papua Guinea or wherever, somewhere in South America. So not that nagar tree. So nagar tree is one. Likucha is another tree. Bakula is one tree. And the banyan tree are the sources. So he says these four trees, their leaves must have been used for different silk worms. And that would have given different qualities of silks. And therefore, that silk was identified with these four trees. This is all conjecture that we can make out, because why would you refer to a silk with a tree? There can't be any other logical reason. Yeah? So, and in this he says the Suvarna Kudya is the best. So those of you who want to do your deep textile research, I know how you can do it because all of this is different now. This place in Assam, I think, must have had kick-ass good silk, because many times he keeps talking about this. Yeah. So this also shows that we also had our own silk at that time. He talks about China silk also, but since he is waxing so eloquent on Indian silk, clearly we must have had equally good stuff ourselves. Yeah. And then he goes on to wool, and he spends some time on wool, because wool may not have been something that the wealthy people wore in those days. They have been used for carpets and bed covers and stuff. But poor people used wool a lot. Therefore, wool was an important taxation issue for the king. And he says woolen cloth is either white in color, it's all red in color, or it's part red, which means we knew how to dye wool at that time. The blanket, the kauchapaka, the kulamitika, the saumitika, and the horse's saddle cloth, the colored blanket, the talichaka, and the armor are all things in which you use wool. This is a broad range of whatever it is. So this kauchapaka is some kind of an undergarment, like a waistcloth kind of a thing. The others not able to figure out what they are. Horse saddle, of course, we know. And armory, of course, they had steel armor outside. They always had wool underneath to protect the steel from hurting the skin. And out of all of these, the one which became a little slippery to touch when it was wet is considered the best quality. And if it's not slippery, if it's not wet, if it's really fine and soft, that was the best quality. So this is the range that he talks about in wool. And he says wool is used for clothing, it's used for bedding, it's used for transport equipment, and it's used for military protection as well. Now, we've made all our cloths and stuff. There are a whole bunch of dhobis who are washing these cloths for us. Superintendent has to check this also. So he says, when today, I don't know, I've not seen a dhobi for a long time, but in those days, I remember my mom would give it one day and we'll get it a fortnight back. He says that's not the right way to do it, because he says you have to give the dhobi different timelines for the different textiles that he is washing, because each fabric needs different washing cycles. So he says washermen will wash garments on wooden boards or smooth slabs of stone. That's their job. Yeah. For us, they will return a garment white like a flower bud, cleansed on stone, bleached after fixed duration. So there was a commitment of the when the washerman will give the cloth back. So the whatever fabric was dyed blue may be returned after 6 days. A precious garment dyed with saffron and lac juice or manjista after 7 days. So what contract you had with your dhobi on when he gave the fabric back also had something to do with the rates in terms. So we understand that labor intensity and adjusting time was also there. And then he says, sometimes we get the cloth back and it's damaged. So he's thought a little bit about that. And he says at the first washing, if there is a loss, if he damages your cloth, 1/4 of the value of the garment you can recover from the dhobi. Yeah. In the second washing, if he's made a mistake, 1/5. And in one tool, this one is a little difficult to understand because there's something called carding they seem to have done for the wool, must have been to make it a little fine. So he says in 1 tula of wool, which is one measure of wool, a reduction of 5 falas. So 5 falas will be another measurement for the weight. So this is when you card the wool, there is a chance that the quantity of wool will reduce, but for 1 tula of wool, it cannot go beyond 5. Yeah. So this is the amount of detail. So presumably the superintendent will check this. If it's more than this, they will have to pay a fine to the treasury. So everything, remember, it's all about how from this, if there's a problem, the king will make money. Yeah. So what else do we have? Wages and disputes. Of course, there'll be wages, there'll be disputes as well. So this is in disputes concerning dyeing, trustworthy experts shall fix the wage. So because dyeing, it depends on a lot of things, right? Depends on the quality of the dye, how the process is done. It's something for the expert. So if there is a dispute between presumably the dyer and the person who's given him the fabric to dye, and there's a dispute over there, there'll be some third-party arbitration over there, but it has to be by an expert dyer. For the most precious garments, the wage shall be 1 pana. For the medium quality, there can be 1/2, and for the lowest, 1/4. So he says, of course, there's disputes can happen, but that doesn't mean that if the person who gave the cloth is economically very powerful, he can't squeeze the dyer because the dyer has not done a good job. So somewhere there has to be fairness and there has to be limit in the fine. Also, there should be a limit. And the superintendent's job, of course, will be to check whether the fine is paid or not. Yeah? And one thing that I like a lot in this is about the women. He says, women who cannot stir out of their houses, widows, crippled women and maidens, but they also want to earn work, they can work in the textile industry. So he says, if they come themselves to the yarn house, they should be given a job. They can take it back to their houses and work. And when they bring it back, they will have to bring it back during the early hours of the day to return it and take payment. Why early hours of the day? Because it's safer for them. Yeah. So he's really thought through this. So even women who could not, and getting a job in those days was a really difficult thing. Women who could otherwise not find work at all, if they agreed to come early in the morning to give the product and take the wages back, they were expected to get work, and people couldn't deny them the work. I thought it was a revolutionary thing. We're talking about 4th century BC. Yeah? Then he says, textiles are morally regulated communities for selling, for bringing out, for pledging the garments of others. So apparently you could pledge textiles and get a loan on it as well. Can't do that today, I guess. The fine shall be, so if you sell, hire, pledge garments to others without getting the necessary approvals, you'll be fined 12 panas. For change of the garment, which I'm assuming that if somebody has taken textiles on loan, they have not given it back or they give something different, the fine shall be double the price and the return of the garment as well. Fraud in cloth is treated very, very severely and seriously, because I think cloth was also some kind of a financial equivalent. Something like money had a fairly valuable role in the barter economy. Because remember, most of this was barter economy. Very few people would have even seen a coin. So in that, generally, so some trivia in Tamil Nadu, since we're only working on eastern or in Uttar Pradesh now. In Tamil Nadu in those days, one measure of rice was equal to one measure of salt. And also in for Roman times, one measure of pepper was equal to one measure of gold. And in one tusk of ivory was worth one flagon of Roman wine in Kerala. So just giving you in barter economy, what were the rates? In Tamil Nadu, we don't have textiles being a currency, but clearly in Arthashastra there is. Yeah. So this is how much I have from the Arthashastra on textiles. I also wanted to say a little, and in some places he also talks about how, like I said, a lot of embroidery being done. And since we focus a lot on the Arthashastra, I got to say a few things about Tamil Nadu as well. In Sangam literature, we have references to textiles. In inscriptions from till about the 12th century, we have a lot of references to textiles. I didn't prepare for it, but I thought I'll share a few things with you. One is in the Sangam period, we know that we were very famous for our embroidery skills. And the embroidery was supposed to be as good as a surgeon who would stitch a wound. And it comes in, of all places, you find this in a love poem, where the lady is sitting by the seashore and she's really pining away for her beloved. And she says, look at the beauty of my land. Why has my boyfriend deserted me? When is he going to come back? And in that context of describing the beauty, she says, the sea during high tide, it leaves a lot of these rock pools. And then the sea goes away, like my boyfriend who's gone away to some distant shore to earn money. And I'm sitting here all alone like a rock pool waiting for the sea to come back. But in these rock pools are many of these stalks. And these stalks have really long beaks like a needle. And they so gracefully put it into the rock pool and come out with a fish. It's like a surgeon who is weaving a wound back, or an embroider who's working on thread. What an amazing visual, no? So that you have. In Tamil Nadu, Thiruvotriyur to Kerala border, Kayalpatnam, Pune Kayal, that region to Kerala border, Nagapatnam to Kerala border. These were the three main trade routes for us. And we definitely bought textiles from Indonesia and China. Either we bought it and we just sold it to the Arab merchants, or sometimes I think we did some value added work to it and we sold it there. Arab merchants prefer to buy ikat from Orissa from Tamil Nadu. So the ikat traveled all the way through Machilipatnam, Visakhapatnam, all of those places, came down south, and then it moved to the Arab traders as well. Sometimes we sold our cloth to Indonesia as well. China, I don't think we did, but we sold to Indonesia, Sumatra, that region as well. We have instances of how these traders with cloth. What is the Tamil word, especially in the Brahmin community, for ritually pure cloth? Muddy, right? This muddy is such an old word. Today, it means ritually pure cloth that only I have washed and only I can touch. Yeah. If somebody else touches that cloth that I use, then it becomes whatever the opposite of muddy is. Muddy is actually, we find this from as early as the 9th century. Muddy was just folded, good quality cloth, which was pure. Must have been pure cotton white cloth, which is called muddy. So these traders will find different places to get these cloth. And they were very, very enterprising. Huh? So you had a caravan in those days. You'd have had an army going with them. And in many places, they had pop-up shops. So we have inscriptions where they had pop-up shops where they'd open for all the local people to come and buy. And then hey, you have an inventory, you might as well make money on the way, no? And then eventually take them to Kerala, and from Kerala it will go abroad. So I often jokingly say this: if you've been to any part of Italy like Venice and wherever, if you dig a little deep into all those big palazzos in Venice, somewhere or the other they have made their money in India, either in cloth or in pepper. They have made their money. So there are some inscriptions on cloth as gifts as well to temples. Not that many. There's a lot of references to cloth in terms of how merchants would promise to pay the local temple a particular portion of the inventory of cloth that they carried as a toll when they crossed that village. So we have references like this. We have some references to what kind of cloth. We don't have many references, but that cloth was a very important part of the well-being, financial well-being of not just the Mauryan period, but also of Tamil Nadu is very, very apparent. So I want to end by saying that one is, of course, the cloth, but you can't talk in a lovely sari shop without talk, and with a lot of women, can't talk a little bit about jewelry as well. So a little bit of jewelry we have to talk about. So for jewelry, we're going to travel out in time. We're coming to about the 17th century. Raghunatha Nayaka Adbhudayamu. This is a shame that sitting in Tamil Nadu, we wouldn't have even heard of this text. It's a text that I really think we should do more dances of. It should be in our school reading and stuff. Vijayaraghava Nayaka is a Nayak king, Telugu speaking Nayak king in Tanjavur in the 17th century. He chronicles one day in the life of his father, Raghunatha Nayaka. And this book is just that. It's just one day in the life. In that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the jewelry the king wears. So I don't know if you've been to Tanjavur. There's that Indra Mandiram, which is a tall watchtower kind of thing. It's just in front of the art gallery. And this side, if you see, the Indra Mandiram will be a multi-story building. There'll be a pond at the bottom. There's no water in it now. This actually happens over there. Let me just quickly read this out. So Raghunatha Nayaka, after his bath, he allows the priest to apply the caste mark on his forehead. He does a Shraddha ceremony for his ancestors. And then he retires to his chambers to dress up for the day ahead. He wears a silk uttara, which is a shawl. And then he wears silk nijar pajamas and a half-sleeve shirt. And then he proceeds to put on an impressive range of jewelry. The Chandran, the Vonti, the Chesanu, the Kalyan, the Bahupurulu, and necklaces include a haram with a padakam, a todi, and his fingers have rings with novel shapes. Nudana Ratna Anguli. That's a Telugu word. All of this is in Telugu. Yeah. And what else does he have? His ankle has a jewel pandaram. This pandaram was a very thick gold anklet studded with a lot of jewels, and only a person who had been gifted it by the king for their extraordinary contribution to literature, only they were allowed to wear it. And of course, the king gifted himself one, but he was a great poet also. So I'm sure he deserved this. Yeah. Then the decoration is complete with him wearing several biridus, medals or title, and a magnificent headdress with pearl tassels. Going on to the horse stables, which you can still see in the Tanjore Palace today, which are built in the Pathan style. He goes to the elephant stables and he inspects all his fine elephants. We have their names: Ramabhanam, Rajasimham, Muddu Murari, and so on. So a lot of names are given. And the best elephants, his favorite elephants, had beautifully painted foreheads, and they wore red cloth sewn with rubies from Gujarat. Yeah. Gujarat Jadi Kempulu Vastram. This is the Telugu word for that. And then, of course, he goes on a palace tour and everything. And when he sits down to eat, only the king and the queen are separated by a Jariga Teralu, which is a silk curtain. And then, of course, there's a lot of stuff on what they eat and all that. But when Jayashree gives me a chance to talk about food, we can come with those. So this is the end of my talk.
Cut off the thumbs of the.
Oh, those Muslim weavers, no?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we don't have it's an oral story. We don't know. But we do know that the British started Madras because they found dealing with the textile traders of Andhra was extraordinarily difficult. That's why they started Madras. Because what will happen is, at that time, Auntie is wearing something. This is a block print, right? Chintz.
Yeah.
This chintz was so famous in England in the 16th, 17th century that the European textile market was collapsing. And we did a brilliant job. I'm not sure, you'll know this better, Auntie, what you're wearing, is this hand-drawn or is it a block print? Block print. So we did both also. We did ones where there was block print with hand-drawn designs. So some of these examples in European country houses, in Paris museums are absolutely fantastic. I mean, really, really fantastic stuff. They loved it so much that their textile market collapsed. And traders from England came to India, especially the Chennai region, little north of Chennai, just to buy these. And their big problem was, very usual in this business, the guy will take the advance. And he'll say, Seri, or whatever, whatever. Fourth month he comes back, the guy would have disappeared. He can't be found. So they had a lot of problems. That's when they decided the best way is to get these craftsmen under our control, which is why our Blacktown, Madras High Court, that region started. So they had that problem they had. But this cutting off the thumb, I don't know whether they may have done it, don't know.
And material so fine that it could go through a raining.
Yeah, for sure. That you even know in that Muzaf. Huh? No. This is Muslim. No. Where is that? Murshidabad. There's a museum there. They've actually kept that muslin cloth. You can actually see through this thing. Yeah, thick. Yeah, auntie. This was the Dalpat by Seth or something. They were a Marwadi family which moved to Murshidabad, and they were the ones who funded the Nawab and all that. So business family, but they were extraordinarily wealthy. Their palace museum, they actually have that muslin going through the ring. You can see that old muslin. Yeah, it's true.
And to do it without any machines. Oh my goodness.
Fabulous. So in that one portrait we have of Rajaraja Chola in the Brihadishwara temple, his women are actually wearing one transparent garment like that. And the painting is very damaged, but you can make out that they're wearing that kind of a damage. So did they get that from the north, or did we also make it? I don't know. But yeah, women wore that kind of stuff for sure. Yes, sir.
Dr. Chakravarthy, I wonder, looking at the values of these Artha Shastra, would you start a movement that the present day politicians, when they are getting swearing in the assembly or parliament, were given a copy of Artha Shastra to show how important to follow this?
No, I'm not so much worried about politicians, Doc, I got to say, because they're not bothered about me, but I am worried about children. Actually, the idea of this topic came about because my next book is on 21 non-fiction texts of ancient India. Just like for governance, Arthashastra is the number one. For our music, dance and drama, Natyashastra is number one. For music, it is Sangeeta. So like this, I've taken those important texts and I'm translating them into English. That's when I found out so much, and Jayashree earlier told me, think of a good idea. And I didn't want to do temples. I thought this was a good one. That's how this came about. So that I'm doing for children for sure. Politicians, they don't bother about me. I don't bother about them. But it'd be lovely if... yes, Auntie.
They must have read the Artha Shastra through and through. That's why they're so
Possibly.
expert.
Yeah, absolutely. But I wish bureaucrats would read it. No, not even for the rest of it. I mean, this textiles and all, a little outdated. And some of the stuff, okay, just to set the record right, some of this you can't practice. No? There's a whole adhyaya in Arthashastra on the kind of smokes that you can create, which you can push into your enemy territory. Some of it is really creepy. the kind of rubbish that you burn into that fire so that it creates some different waves to the kingdom. Some of this you have to take with a pinch of salt. But largely, and there's one part where he talks about how much of food should everybody eat. He makes calculations right down to your pet dog. He makes calculations. And if there's anything else that you don't want to read, just the last part, I think is brilliant for all of us. He talks about how he has written this book and how logically he has developed. So he says, do not quote a fact when you're not going to use it later. Right? If you're making two statements together, they should have a connection with each other. If you say something, you should substantiate it with examples. If you're quoting somebody else who said something before that, you have to quote it and then you have to give your point of view and explain why you think it is better. So it's just that logical thinking. That last chapter, I feel whether politicians read it or not, anybody who's doing serious academic research, that last one chapter is just about 2 pages that they should definitely read. It will make us much, much more effective communicators. Just that last chapter. And Angada somewhere he says, I'm Vishnu Gupta, I did this. That's all. We don't know anything about it. Everything else is just conjecture.
What about the tax structure?
Oh, that I didn't prepare for. There's a lot. See, this tax, whatever I gave you for textiles, I talked about today. So like this for liquor, for everything, commerce, there'll be tax structures for that.
You just mentioned there are ranges like...
Yeah. Always, so the general principle is you have to look at the needs of the other person also and be fair on both sides. Like this Dobie thing is a classic thing, right?
Yes, correct.
Don't give one side just so that it's convenient for you. It has to be from the other side as well.
Actually, it's mind-blowing of so much he has covered.
Yeah, really. It's a mind-blowing thing. It's a shame that book is not ready, but please have a look at the other books that I've done. It's really, the extent to which he's thought through this.
He has thought on all corners actually.
Always. And we really owe our thanks to Shama Shastri, because if he hadn't translated it and found it, we would have lost this. They will be in Mysore. Yeah, they'll be in Mysore. But Shama Shastri's translation, Kangles, is all available online. Download it.
Or Dr. Pradeep.
Thank you very much. Thank you.